That's perfectly fair. Let me just take a drink real quick, and we'll start taking a look at the black cards from this set. I'm enjoying doing this, but it's taken me a little bit longer than I thought it was going to. But that's what happens when you break down an entire set, I guess. I will stay hydrated. Thank you very much, Ryan. I appreciate that. How are you guys finding it? Are you enjoying doing this? It's the first time I've kind of sat down and done a proper set review on the channel. Is it something you're enjoying that you'd like to see more in the future? If it is, let me know, because it would be good to know if it's something that's worth doing again sometime for the next set, whatever the situation might be. All right, cool. Black card o'clock. Let's start taking a look at Blood on the Snow. Blood on the Snow is a very interesting card. Very much enjoying it? Good. Good. That's good to know. 6 mana here for a Snow Sorcery. Again, Snow being a relevant card type, there are cards in this set that pick up Snow cards from the graveyard, so being able to pick up your sweeper seems good. Better with more... Okay, cool. That's good. I'm glad people are enjoying it. That's basically what I was a little concerned about, because, as I say, I've not done this before, so, yeah. Blood on the Snow here, choose one, destroy all creatures or destroy all planeswalkers, both obviously very powerful abilities, then return a creature or planeswalker card with converted mana cost X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, where X is the amount of snow mana you spent on this spell. I think this card is... How do I put this? This falls into completely fucking ridiculous or completely fucking unplayable territory. And that depends solely on one or two things. I think this is better than Vile Offering because you don't need the legendary creature in play to cast it. Basically, for me, it depends on how fast the format is. If the format's aggressive and quick and you need cheap sweepers and cheap interaction, this is not going to be good enough. If it's not, and you can afford to be casting the sagas that let you pick up this kind of thing from the graveyard, this is really good. There are a number of premium targets this card can revive on the way in. If you stop and think about it for a second, the average cost of a reanimation spell in Standard these days is somewhere between 4 and 5 mana. So what this card is letting you do is cast a sweeper plus a reanimation spell for 6 mana, which is a really good rate, honestly. The fact this can revive planeswalkers as well is certainly not nothing. There's going to be scenarios where you're just sweeping the board and putting a Teferi Master of Time back into play, or like, you know, something along those lines, Ashiok back into play, and we all know how good some of those planeswalkers can be on an empty board. This also is pretty damn slick with something like Urian. Again, I know we keep mentioning that card so much today because of how many cards in this set are good with Urian Sky Nomad, but casting a sweeper that kills all creatures and then just like flickering all your Omen of the Seas, or your Maze Mind Tomes, or, you know, your permanents, that's a lot. That's Comrade. That's really good for 6 mana. That's very, very powerful. So yeah, I think for me this is very much really good or completely unplayable territory, and that will largely depend on how fast the format is to give you chance to set up those really dumb Blood on the Snow turns where it's just like, kill all the creatures, bring back a permanent that you have to answer right now. And that's kind of the crux as to how good this will be, I think. This is kind of filler, I think. Okay, actually, this might not be filler. Let's talk about this one real quick. Blood Sky Berserker. Interesting little uncommon here. We talked when we were going through the white cards about the whole cast your second spell each turn mechanic that seems to be weaved in this set. Human is obviously a relevant creature type, but having a 2-drop that is getting 2+1/+1 counters and menace until the end of turn whenever you cast your second spell each turn, that's pretty good. We talked about the 1-drop already that is, you know, a 1 mana 2/2 if you cast it on turn 2 next to another 1-drop, which is an awful lot of damage, but like, this is the kind of card that not only can enable other second spell each turn cards, it's cheap enough at 2 mana to do that, but if you're like, turn 2 is this, and your turn 3 is like second 2-drop into 1-drop that cares about the second spell, this is a lot of damage. This thing hits hard and fast, and it is really hard to block. Those counters are permanent, so triggering this once just makes it like above rate. It might even have some weird synergies with like Winding Constrictor and like Conclave Mentor in Historic, because it is +1/+1 counters, and obviously something like casting this on turn 2 into a 1-drop and a Winding Constrictor on turn 3. Now that is a lot of damage. So yeah, this is cool. I'm not sure it's like good enough. It's definitely not a format all-star or anything, but this is a reasonable uncommon and something that's worth paying attention to, I think. Burning Rune Demon is a card we can look at real quick. I don't think this is very good, but I'd like to talk about it with you guys and see how you feel. Burning Rune Demon here is a 6-mana 6/6 flyer, which, like, 6 mana is a lot, as we were just talking about with Blood on the Snow. But a 6/6 flying body is a decent rate for that kind of stat line. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for exactly 2 cards that are not called Burning Rune Demon that have different names. If you do, your opponent chooses one of them. You put the chosen card in your hand and the other one in your graveyard. So basically you get to cast half of a Gifts Ungiven, but you can't do the select 2 and put them both in my graveyard trick. I feel like this is a combo enabler. Yeah, I agree, it's got Atris-y vibes to it, but it is very expensive for what it does. But this feels like a combo enabler. Like, it feels like you're supposed to cast this, show your opponent 2 cards that if they put either of them in the graveyard, they die. Do I think I know that combo, or am I sure it exists? No. But, yeah, I think Dono's got a point, actually. Letting your opponent always give you the choice is worse, definitely. So you need to be in a situation where you're taking away the choice from your opponent, where neither outcome is good. I'm not sure if that's quite there yet, but it's the kind of card that you look at and go, well, if you print X, Y, and Z, this card is bananas. So, might be worth paying attention to. I don't think it's good, honestly. I'm a bit down on it the more I talk about it, but it's kind of worth paying attention to because it looks like the kind of card that's very easy to break. And that always kind of scares me, so... Cleaving Reaper here is a bit crap. This card would be fantastic if it went back to the battlefield, but it does not, so it is kind of garbage. Crippling Fear here is just like worse Witch's Vengeance. Like, I think the only deck that wants this, which if you can't read it from where you are, I have no idea how big it is on the screen when I'm not bringing up the full screen one. It's a 4-mana sorcery speed card that says choose a creature type. Everything that is not that creature type gets -3/-3. It's a sweeper that you might play in like elves or humans or, you know, insert generic tribal deck here that cares about not killing your own creatures. But 4 mana is a lot for a sweeper that is that situational. I don't see it seeing much play otherwise. This is filler. This is also filler. Oh look, more filler. Okay, Draugr Necromancer. I know this is a card that some people are high on. I'm going to give myself a second to read through this card and also talk it through, and also just like take suggestions from the chat, because I've seen, obviously I follow a lot of other content creators who are also doing the whole I'm building decks and getting ready for early access thing, and I've seen a lot of decks with this card in it, and I'm not sure I quite understand why. So if I'm missing something, that'd be really cool. It's a 4-mana 4/4 snow creature. So again, decent base rate, snow creature, relevant. Zombie Cleric, both also semi-relevant creature types. If a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, exile that card with an ice counter on it instead. You may cast spells from among cards in exile your opponent owns with ice counters on them, and you can spend mana from snow sources as though it were mana of any colour. This just feels like a really slow Gonti to me. Like, I would really like someone who is high on this card to explain to me why they're so high on it, because I don't think it's a 1 or 2 person kind of thing. I've seen this in a lot of decks that people have built to try out for early access, and I kind of just don't get it. Yeah, I'm not really seeing it, but I would love some input if anyone has a reason. Can you still cast the card if it dies? I don't think you can. I'm pretty sure this piece of text being on the card means that it has to be in play. If you can, then that might be it. If you can just cast them at any time, then maybe. But I don't think so. I don't think this card's very good. But I would love some input if anyone believes I'm incorrect, or if I'm just missing something. Draugur's Helm here, not very relevant. You can cast them due to the ice counter. The card doesn't. I don't think so, right? Because this line here says you may cast spells from among cards in exile your opponent owns with ice counters on them. So surely, if Necromancer is not in play, you can't anymore. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Anyway, yes, Dream Devourer. Another card that I think is kind of interesting and definitely worth talking about. I understand the image on this one is a bit unclear. Sorry about that. This is a 2-mana 0/3 Demon Cleric. Very unique stat line. Each non-land card in your hand without Foretell has Foretell. Its Foretell cost is equal to its mana cost reduced by 2. And whenever you Foretell a card, it gets +2/+0 until the end of turn. I'm pretty sure that bottom line of text doesn't matter for the most part. But giving spells that don't have Foretell sounds terrifying. Like, I'm not sure how good it's going to be in practice, but like, let's try and think of some of the best spells in Standard right now, I guess. Like, you can cast a 2-mana into the story off of this thing. Don't they get stuck if this dies? No, maybe? No, they don't. Because of the way that the wording on Foretell is phrased. So, during your turn, you may pay 2 colorless and exile it from your hand face down. You can cast it on a later turn for its Foretell cost. So, I believe the answer to that is no. They do not get stuck if it dies. But again, new cards, wording is difficult, so maybe I'm wrong on that one. But I do believe you can still cast them if this dies. I am not entirely sure what spells I'm massively scared of right now. That you can grant Foretell to, but we've seen it numerous times in the past. Giving keywords to cards that don't actually have those keywords is scary. So I feel like Dream Devourer is that kind of card that if a spell is making a mainstay in Standard or a real fight for the top, being able to, tuck it away for a later turn, keep it out of the way, protect yourself from a Thoughtseize or a discard spell. Even as you Foretell Planeswalkers and stuff. I don't know. It's a very it's another one. I've said it a lot today, but it's a very unique effect. It does something that nothing else has really done, which makes this card really hard to evaluate because we have no comparisons to draw, or no idea how powerful that kind of thing is going to be. But from experience, granting keywords to things that don't have that keyword is usually at least combo enabling and sometimes extremely powerful. And obviously those cards weren't designed to be foretold, so maybe you can get away with some shenanigans. Yeah, splitting the cost over 2 turns might be relevant, but I think the power of something like this would probably be on instant speed cards, right? Like being able to tuck it away at a lower mana cost at instant speed seems like it could be quite the combination. So I don't know. This is a very unique effect. It's hard to evaluate. I feel like maybe there might be some power there. We'll have to try a few things out and wait and see. Egon, God of Death. This is a card that's got a lot of people talking as well, as most of the gods have done. Black God here, 3 mana 6/6 with Death Touch. Now that is quite the stat line, but I'm also going to use this moment to raise one of my biggest pet peeves in Magic. Wizards. I understand that Death Touch is a black keyword. Why do you keep putting it on 6/6s? There is not an awful lot of things that a 6/6 doesn't already kill. Please stop putting Death Touch on 6/6s. Thank you. Anyway, at the beginning of your upkeep, exile 2 cards from your graveyard. If you can't, you have to sacrifice it and draw a card. this is just the front side of this card, so we'll look at the back side in a second to inform our evaluation. But this thing is big. You know, based on the rant that I just gave you, it's a 6/6. It hits you like a truck. And I guess because of Death Touch in this particular case, no one really wants to block it. Need to destroy all these 0/7s. Oh, I forgot about those. How else do I get through Charix without my 6/6 Death Touch creature? Hadn't thought of that. Oh, I look so dumb now. This is great. I'm not sure how often you're going to be casting this thing on turn 3, but I feel like there's a good chance you're casting it on turn 4 a reasonable amount. There are a number of sagas in the set that mill you on turn 3. In fact, the green-blue one does mill you on turn 2. So there's a lot of scenarios that you cast this thing on turn 3, and it's fucking huge. And we've all established that big, huge idiots that are, way undercosted are very good. People are already complaining through the back teeth about Lovestruck Beast being a 3-mana 5/5. This is even bigger than that with more keywords on it. So if you can keep it fueled and keep it going, it's going to be a real issue. And even if it does die, you can just draw a card off it, which isn't the worst thing known to man. It's just obviously not great or anything. It also fuels a lot of the same, pardon my language, bullshit that Lovestruck Beast does, as in enabling turn 4 Great Henge, which I'm sure we all want more of that. Turn 4 Great Henge is a thing you can definitely do with Egon here. So the front side of this card, very, very powerful. Let's take a look at the back side and see what we think of that. The back side of Egon is the Throne of Death. Let's take a look at this. 1-mana artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, you mill a card. And then for 3 mana and tapping it, you can exile a creature from your graveyard to draw a card. So the second bit of text there is, need that 3 mana extra on turn 4. We only had 2 before. Oh, obviously. The second line of text seems like a bit of a nombo with the front side of your god. But this is the kind of card that is really good against control, right? So I actually like this quite a lot. I think the god seems really good, but the god's not great against control, because it's going to perish eventually if they can stick Birth and Meletis tokens or whatever in front of it. It just kind of doesn't matter. Whereas casting this on turn 1 against a blue-white control player, how many cards do you reckon this is going to draw you? Like 4, 5? So, Rye, I agree with you. This is worse than Mazemind Tome. But Mazemind Tome also isn't a 6/6 in other matchups. Because against control, this is worse than Mazemind Tome. But this is way better than Mazemind Tome against Gruul Aggro. If you see my point. It's like, we can't just be like, oh, don't play it against control because it's worse than Mazemind Tome, because thankfully control isn't the only deck in the format. I'm more interested in the fact that I think the backside of this card is good in the matchups where the front side is bad. Exactly. Which I think is super, super cool. And interestingly, this card also plays very well with that trick. You also can't get Tome off Collected Company. Good point. Not sure how much that's going to come up, but good point, Island. I think it plays very well with that trick we talked about with, what's its name? Alrund earlier on, where you can also just flicker this with the Orion and turn it into a 6/6. So, like, you can just, cast the backside of this on turn 1 and then flicker it when you're ready and have a big, dumb, death-touchy idiot. Yeah, I agree, right? Like, you're not going to be... So the play sequence with the backside of this card is going to be, okay, cast all my creatures into a sweeper, or cast all my spells into my opponent's spot removal, and then I can use Throne of Death to draw into more action now that I am out of action. I suppose Dono's right here as well. Like, it seems okay. It can also just fuel Croxer sometimes as well as a 1-mana card that fuels Croxer. People do use Castle Lock Twain, exactly. I like this card a lot. I think you're going to be playing it for the front side for the most part. I think the God is where most of the raw power is. But the fact the back side is good in matchups where the front side is not, I like that. I think this card is a sleeper, and just I'm I'm going to lose to so many Great Henges. Can we stop printing 3-mana creatures that allow me to die to a turn 4 Great Henge? Because, like, I'm really sick of doing that. Hey, Golgari Tom, how you doing? How you doing? I like Egon. I think Egon's very, very cool. Elderfang Disciple. This card's not massively relevant. Eradicator Valkyrie is a card that I am really, really split on. Some people are telling me this thing is a nightmare. Some people are telling me it's garbage. So I'm really very split. Eradicator Valkyrie here, 4-mana flying 4/3 with lifelink and hexproof from Planeswalkers. I think we've only seen protection from Planeswalkers up until this point. I think that was on the Manticore from the other set. But hexproof from Planeswalkers, fairly relevant line of text, I guess. Like, doesn't get bounced by Teferis, doesn't get eaten by Kaya. I don't know, like, you know, whatever. And this has a boast trigger on it that says 2-mana sacrifice a creature. Each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. So we established earlier on that Angel is a relevant creature type. So that might very well be part and parcel of why you're playing this. But a 4-mana flying lifelinker, like, 4/3 stats on that body, I should say, already seems like a reasonable body to me. This boast trigger is what kind of throws a spanner in the works. Like, I feel like you might want to play this in some kind of aristocrat shell, but that kind of deck already has so many good 4-drops. And I'm not sure if paying 2 mana when you attack to Plague Crafter is particularly good. This kind of card is hard to evaluate because it's what we call keyword soup. Where, you know, Wizards stood there when they were designing their Black Mythic and threw darts at a dartboard and just added all the keywords that they hit with the darts onto the same card. You think it replaces Rankle in Green-Black Adventures. That's interesting. I can see that, to be fair. Or it may be some mixture, because Rankle's obviously legendary. Yeah, I'm not sure on this one. The body's really good, but I'm not sure if the boast text is going to matter very much. So I think that's where my concern comes from. But it's a very cool card, for sure. I don't know what this does, and both of them are in a non-English language. So 6 mana, choose a creature type, return up to 2 creature cards of the chosen type from your graveyard to the battlefield. If you foretell this spell, return all creatures of the chosen type from your graveyard to the battlefield instead. Rankle does have haste. Relevant point. This card feels like commander bait. 6 mana reanimate 2 probably just isn't good enough when you're not reanimating 4 to 5 drops very often. So I think I'm going to move on from this one, I think. Feed the Serpent is a card I want to talk about real quick, because a few people brought it to my attention. They are angry about the fact this card was printed, and I'm not entirely sure why. This is 4 mana instant speed, exile target creature or planeswalker. And the argument that some people have is that apparently this is the perfect example of power creep, because the only difference between this and Vraska's Contempt is gaining 2 life. So it's gaining 2 life, a difference between a common and a rare. And I think what people honestly kind of have to remember is that this is 2021. Cards are a bit more powerful now than they were in Ixalan. And honestly, Ixalan was a pretty underpowered set in general when you look back at the history of Magic. Like, it didn't age very well. There's a few cards in it that still see some play here and there, but as a general rule, it was pretty underpowered. Printing this at common is fine. In fact, it's going to be very, very good and limited, and this probably just never sees play over something like Eat to Extinction anyway, so I wouldn't worry about it too much, but I thought it worth commenting on, because it seems to be a point of contention. Yeah, Eat to Extinction already doesn't see standard play, exactly. We've got Grim Augur here, which is a weirdly aggressive snow creature, and most of the other snow stuff seems quite defensive, so I'm not massively in on that. This all looks a bit like limited filler. I'll talk about Poison the Cup, because this seems to be another one that's a bit contentious as well. We had a 5 CMC card at common. Exactly, I don't really get the concern either, or the complaints, but I just thought, given that I'd seen them, I might as well talk about it. So yeah, Poison the Cup here, 3 mana instant. Destroy target creature. If this spell was foretold, scry 2. And it foretells for 2 mana. So basically, you can spend 4 mana over the course of 2 turns to go destroy target creature, scry 2. Is that good? Probably not. However, I know I've said this a few times already, but obviously folks are popping in and out of the stream, so it bears saying, I really am big on this idea that the more foretell cards you play, the better all of your other foretell cards get. Very similar to the energy mechanic. So I can see a copy or two of Poison the Cup being playable in an Esper control shell that is also playing Doomscar, the card draw spell, the counter spell, all that kind of stuff. Because again, when I foretell a card on turn 2, I really want my opponent to be as puzzled as possible, as if they're supposed to play around spot removal, a sweeper, card draw, counter magic, so on and so forth. Interestingly, Poison the Cup plays extremely well with the sweeper itself, because it's the kind of card that punishes your opponent for playing around the sweeper. And that's what you call good deck building. Because if you're foretelling a card on turn 2, your opponent goes, oh no, I can't cast all my creatures onto this board, because if I do, they'll Doomscar me. They cast their biggest, most individually powerful threat, and then you just get to kill it with your removal spell, and they've wasted their entire turn. So I don't think the card is individually powerful, but it's another one of those examples of this card exists, and the fact it exists offers some power to other archetypes. I agree with you, Golgari Tom, this card is significantly worse than Murderous Rider, but I think the only deck that might want it is the decks that are playing other foretell cards for that kind of smokescreen effect that I keep referring to really allow you to disguise your powerful foretell spells. So there's a chance that it finds some play there. But as a universal removal spell, yeah, sure, definitely worse than Murderous Rider for sure. Priest of the Haunted Edge. I don't think this is very good. This is limited filler. Limited filler. Limited filler. This is not limited filler. Let's take a look at Rise of the Dreadman. I'm not sure how I feel about this card, so feels like it might be a nice one to discuss. It's a 3 mana instant, which the fact this was an instant is a thing that a lot of people missed to start with. It creates X 2/2 zombie berserker tokens, where X is the number of non-token creatures that have died this turn. And you can foretell this for a black. This card's really good against sweepers, somewhat unsurprisingly, because your opponent sweeps your board, you cast Rise of the Dreadman, make a pile of zombies, untap, smack your opponent with a pile of zombies. I think this card would be a lot more interesting if Cauldron Familiar was still a card we were allowed to play in Standard, because sacking it to the oven repeatedly and then making a pile of zombies at instant speed sounds like a good time, if you ask me. Other situational needs for this, I don't know. This feels like its main purpose is going to be sweeper protection. You play this with Doomscar and Esper Foretell, wipe their board, make your own. I mean, yeah, maybe. Maybe that's where you... I mean, that feels a bit gimmicky, but to be fair, that is only 4 mana if you foretell them both. So, like, you got to take some hits to foretell a couple of cards early. But I guess that means if you have creatures in play and you go, okay, cast Doomscar, end of turn, cast Rise of the Dreadman, make zombies equal to the number of creatures. Well, I guess you don't even need to be playing your own creatures, right? You just make zombies off of their creatures. Because it is X is the number of non-token creatures that died, not just yours. So yeah, sure. I can see that I can buy that for $1. I can definitely see you like just sweeping your opponent's board and making a pile of 2/2s. That might just be a control endgame, honestly. Yeah, maybe. I feel like this just offers itself up as wrath protection for the average black deck as well. So seems like a pretty flexible card, maybe a bit overcosted, but having a foretell cost for 1 black mana is scary on an instant for sure. So I like it. I like this card. Worth paying attention to, I think. Rune of Mortality. We've talked about the runes a little bit already, so not going to waste too much more time on those. Skem Farm Avenger here. This card is a beast. You'll see when we get down to green that there is a number of really good elves in this set. They've really pushed elves as an archetype that you're, going to want to play. But a 2-mana 3/1 is already a very aggressively costed creature. But whenever another non-token elf or berserker dies, you draw a card and lose a life. Now, we've seen that text very recently stapled onto Midnight Reaper. My boys are back. I mean, good chance, honestly. There is an awful lot of damn good elves in this set, I think, which is something that's worth paying attention to. Sorry, 2 seconds, guys. Just got to deal with something real quick. I apologise if you weren't here earlier on, but my housemate's been taken into hospital due to an injury, so I'm just kind of having to make sure I keep on top of making sure he's okay. So I apologise for the inconvenience. All right, cool. Yeah, as I say, stapled onto a Midnight Reaper recently. Really good there. Obviously plays very well in the sacrifice shells. And if elves are particularly worried about getting swept, this gains a lot of value. I think the fact it's another non-token elf kind of sucks, so it doesn't trigger off itself. And this thing's going to get blocked a lot because it's got 1 toughness. So that might very well be the things that hold it back. But outside of that, I like it. I think this could be good. It's just a case of whether or not it can attack safely. It's another one of those cards you look at and go, well, in a world of Lovestruck Beast, can you ever play this card? And the answer just might be no, because it can never really attack into a green deck in this format, which kind of sucks. But we'll have to wait and see. Yeah, there's some interesting choices you might have, Booster. I agree. Skemfar Shadow Sage is one that a few people have talked about because it can be a good shooter target. Basically, you can choose to make your opponent lose X life, or you gain X life equal to the number of creatures you control that share a creature type. They've said it's like a good tutor target for elves. That's about it, though. Scott Raid is kind of filler. Let's look at the other black god here. Tergrid is another card a lot of people are very excited about. We'll take a look at the front side together first of all. 5 mana 4/5 with Menace. Sure. Decent enough body. Not particularly fantastic, but fine. Whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent or discards a permanent, you may put that card from a graveyard onto the battlefield. Now that's quite a potent piece of text. 5 mana is a lot, for sure. And this is obviously the kind of card that's going to shine in Commander, like, massively. But is this good enough for Standard? Well, it's not particularly easy to make your opponent sacrifice permanents right now. But you can make them discard pretty easily with, Rankle, your Croxers, that kind of effect. So making them discard's pretty easy, but also you're giving them the choice. You're giving them the choice of what to discard. So they're obviously never going to try and discard something that's really, really good for you to put back into play. Very powerful effect, but seems very hard to use. Let's take a look at the backside of Tergrid and see what the other half of the card does. We have his Lantern here. Yeah, the big text on these cards makes them hard to... the big text on these cards makes them hard to about. I agree. I knew what you meant as well, is the worst part. There's just a lot going on. Like, things in this set do a lot of things. And it makes evaluation really hard. So 4 mana legendary artifact here. Target player loses 3 life unless they sacrifice a non-land permanent or discard a card. That doesn't seem very good. I'll be honest. Again, your opponent just gets the choice. These Punisher effects just don't tend to be very good in constructed formats because it's really hard to get the result that you want. Your opponent's always picking the thing that hurts them the least. And spending 4 mana to untap this, I mean, sure. In the late game, it's going to start machine gunning your opponent, but in the late game, I can be killing my opponent in any number of ways. I think this card's really sweet for Commander, for sure. But I don't think this is a constructed all-star. I think it's kind of hard to utilize either side. It seems a bit expensive, but I'd love to be wrong. I really would. So we got some more filler down here, and then we get to move on to one of my good friends. All-star here, Tybalt, currently disguised as Valky, the God of Lies. I like Valky a lot, so let's take a look at what this card does. We'll walk you through it. It's a 2-mana legendary creature, which you see there is a lot of those in this set. There are a few payoffs for it a bit later on. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent reveals their hand. For each opponent, exile a creature card revealed this way until it leaves the battlefield. You can then pay X to choose a creature that you exiled with it to make it into a copy of that thing. Well, this card is going to see so much play in Historic, because if you cast Valky on turn 2 and your opponent's hand has an Uro in it, they are in for a bad time. You're going to exile that Uro, and then on your turn 3, you're going to spend 3 mana and turn your Valky into an Uro. And that's not very nice. That's not very nice at all. The same obviously applies for Croxer, and that can be done in Standard, and only costs you 2 mana. So definitely some high roll potential on Valky here. Most of these like Brain Maggot, Kite Self, Freebooter style creatures with discard effects have always been kind of reasonable anyway. They've always seemed like fairly playable. The important part of this is it does have a backside, which is a very powerful Planeswalker, so I think you're likely to be playing Valky for the front side for the most part, but the backside means this is not going to be dead in the late game either. If you draw this and your opponent has no hand, you're just going to cast the 7-mana Planeswalker, which we'll take a look at together in just a second. Importantly, there are also some shenanigans you can do with this card in Modern because of the way that Cascade is worded. You can Cascade into Valky, God of Lies, and choose to cast the Planeswalker half. So, a turn 3 7-mana Planeswalker, yeah, that's not bad. That might be pretty good. So let's take a look at Tibalt himself, the Planeswalker side of this card, and see how we feel about it. Tibalt Cosmic Imposter here, as I say, 7 mana. As Tibalt enters the battlefield, you get an emblem that says, you may play cards exiled with Tibalt, and spend mana as though they were mana of any colour. So this is important because getting the emblem means that if Tibalt dies, the cards you exile, still castable, which is really good. You can +2 to exile the top card of each player's library. You can -3 to exile target artifact or creature, or you can -8 to exile every card in all graveyards and gain 3 red. So as I say, with Tibalt here, I think most of the time you're playing this card in your deck for the front side. I think Valky is the more unique effect, and obviously just like the more universally applicable one. But sometimes you're going to get to the late game and your opponent's going to have no cards in hand, and you're just going to want a threat. And Tibalt does a very good job at that. The emblem is a big deal here because, as you see, all 3 abilities exile, meaning anything you exile for any reason is castable. Whether Tibalt is alive or not, which is important for the ultimate, because it means that, you know, if you ultimate it and it dies to its own ultimate, you still get to cast all the spells that you exiled. So peeling cards off the library is fine. Being able to cast target creatures or artifacts that you've exiled, also pretty good. Yeah, this is a powerful card, but it is obviously very expensive for what it does. So I think, for the most part, like, you're playing this for Valky, but I think the card is really solid, and also offers that flexibility we've said about a few other cards over the course of today. That it's like it's good in the mid game, it's good in the late game. So yeah, I like it a lot. I think the card will almost certainly see a fair bit of play, and it's just very naturally good against Uro and Croxer, which are obviously 2 cards you can't not discuss really when you're talking about Magic these days. Let's take a look at Veragoth, Bloodsky Sire. Just going to take a quick second to rehydrate. You can familiarise yourself in the meantime. We'll go through it in just a sec. Sweet. Excuse me. Alright, so 3 mana 2/3 with Death Touch here. Not a great rate, but Death Touch is a semi-relevant keyword because there is that weird hooded Blightfang payoff card from M21, I think, that is good for that kind of thing, but unlikely to be relevant. Has a Boast trigger here that lets target player search their library for a card, shuffle it, and put it on top. So the Boast trigger is literally Vampiric Tour, which is interesting. I thought this card was okay, and then I watched Ross Miriam play it in Rakdos Mid-Range on the Versus Live series when they were testing brand new cards. And it looked fucking awful. to put it in the bluntest possible way. I think this is just too slow. Like, for 3 mana, this body just isn't good. A 3 mana 2/3 with Death Touch, like... Yeah, sure, Death Touch is fine, but this body isn't any good to me if my opponent's slapping an Embercleave on their creature and kicking my teeth in. And I'm not attacking with it until turn 4. I'm not drawing the card that I'd shooted for until turn 5. So against all the aggro players, I'm already dead. Against all the control players, this never got to attack. I'm just kind of not seeing where I want it. It seems real slow, real clunky. Very cool commander, probably enables all kinds of stupid combo kills in that format. But I don't like it. I don't think it's very good for constructed Magic, so unlikely to see much play this one, I think. However, well worth noting that the showcase artwork on this is badass as hell. Take a look at this. Some of these showcase arts in this set are just... I'm very much a metal Viking fan. I listen to a lot of metal and punk music, have done since my early years. So this kind of stuff is just really up my alley. I am so about this. Let's see who's next. Vengeful Reaper here. This card is just limited fodder, I think. Village Rites getting a reprint. This art is significantly more badass than the last one, which is super cool. But Village Rites obviously a card now that has seen plenty of play in all kinds of formats, standard, historic, so on and so forth. Just very powerful, will continue to be very powerful, happy to see it. Staying in the format. Way Down here is an interesting little common. I think this was one of the later ones to be spoiled. So let's take a look at this. Way Down here is a sorcery, which does hold it back a little bit. And as an additional cost to cast it, you have to exile a creature from your graveyard. Target creature gets -3/-3. Obviously going to be pretty solid and limited, for sure. This might actually be okay in those like stealth mill strategies we were talking about before. It's hard for this to be better than Bloodchief's Thirst, I think. It's hard. But we've obviously seen formats and stuff in the past where Disfigure has been a sideboard card, even though Tragic Slip is legal, and all this kind of stuff. So another somewhat acceptable 1-mana black piece of interaction is good to have. Like, I think it's likely this is not good enough, because we live in a world where we have Bloodchief's Thirst, Heartless Act, Eliminate, all these cheap, effective-ish pieces of black removal. But it's worth knowing it exists, especially if there's suddenly a reason to want to exile creature cards from your own graveyard, which I don't know what that would be just yet, but you never know, I suppose. Alright, that brings us to an end of black.